As we all know, Berserk is a manga full of enigmas. Like, who is the Skull Knight? And will Griffith ever apologize to Casca for what he did? And will we ever figure out who Guts' daddy is? But this is why we love the manga. It leads to a lot of speculation among the fandom, and because of that, we get a lot of fun theories to kick around amongst ourselves. But today I want to talk about a theory that is not my own, but something that was brought to my attention by one of my friends. And I should also mention that this theory has been floating around on Reddit for some time, actually a couple of years now, so it's out there on the internet if you look for it. And the theory that I'm referring to is the PCAF theory. Now, many of you may be wondering, the PCAF theory? Wasn't PCAF that little elf mentioned in chapter 102 just very briefly? Yeah, it's actually the very same. And for those of you who may have forgot, as Jill explains in chapter 102, long ago in a village, there was a boy named PCAF, with pointed ears and red eyes. His parents loved him very much, but he was always bullied by the village children because of his eyes and ears. They called him red-eyed PCAF and pointy-eared PCAF. PCAF thought, this isn't my home, these people aren't my real parents. PCAF would venture off into the woods to find his real parents and his own world in which to live. He would then meet some fairies that had red eyes and pointy ears, just like him. And one of them informed him of something very vital, that a man and a woman brought a child to the forest one day to save their baby from a severe illness. Now the baby was saved with the use of elfish magic, but in exchange, his appearance was affected. In fact, it was made to resemble elves. Now, after hearing the story, PCAF would return home. But when he got there, he found out that hundreds of years had passed, leaving only PCAF to cry over his loss. Jill concludes by saying that Rosine loved that story, and that she was just like PCAF. Now there's many interesting parts about this story, but there are three pivotal elements that I want to focus in on. Number one, time dilation. Now from the story, we learn that time spent in the elf world is much different than time spent in the human world. For PCAF, hundreds of years went by in just a few moments. We know this to be true based on what Isma's mother said in chapter 342. The flow of time is different on this island, i.e. Elfhelm, than it is in the outside world. Shirka confirms this by saying that certain fairy tales tell of children being lured away by elves, and when they return home, several decades have passed in the real world. Now, one of the conundrums that still remains is why time hasn't skipped forward in the human world when Guts' party was stuck on Elfhelm. In fact, that was something that I talked about in my previous videos. I was speculating on how far in the future we could go, like, would Rickert be an adult by now? Would he be older than Guts? Unfortunately, it seems like this whole time dilation effect didn't have much effect on the real world. I'm not sure if Studio Gaga and Koji Mori forgot about this little nuance, or maybe it will be explained in a later chapter. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the second important point is that PCAF has red eyes and pointy ears. Now, throughout the manga, we've only known one person to have red eyes, and that would be none other than the Skull Knight. Now, is this to suggest that the Skull Knight is in fact PCAF from the fable? That's really hard to say. What's important to realize is that Skull Knight has had dealings with elves in the past, and due to their influence, he attained red eyes. And obviously this is not too surprising, since his armor came from the dwarf Hanar, and he had a purported love interest with the Lady Priestess of Cherry Blossoms, the one that resided on Elfhelm. So this information was pretty obvious from the get-go. We already knew about this. But it's the third point that this leads into that's pretty important. Now, throughout the manga, some people have noticed that Guts has unusually pointed ears. Now, this could be just due to Mira's drawing style, or it could be hinting at something else. In chapter 92, Skull Knight suggests something rather important. Seldom do elves reveal themselves to humans. Maybe you have some tie to the elves. Now, this could suggest that Guts has been healed by elves at a very young age, attaining the appearance of elves just like the fable of PCAF. Now, we know that Guts was born from a hung woman. Furthermore, Skull Knight knew this information. He knew that Guts was born from a hung woman. Now, is it in fact possible that Skull Knight used elf dust on the young Guts to keep him alive at this point in time? Or is it possible that a group of elves found the helpless Guts and provided him with some magic to help protect him until he was found by some people? Now, a third theory that is floating out and about is that Guts himself is a dark elf. What does this exactly mean? Now, bear with me because this is a bit of a stretch, and it's not necessarily something I wholeheartedly believe in, but it's just kind of an interesting theory to ponder. Now, normal elves bring levity, cheerfulness, and happiness to the world. They're basically like a good fortune. Presumably, dark elves would be the exact opposite. They would bring darkness, gloom, and tragedy. Now, for example, if Guts is a dark elf, ponder this. Guts was taken in by Gambino. After this happened, Gambino lost his wife. He then lost his ability to fight in battle and eventually lost his life. Subsequently, Guts joined the Band of the Hawk. And about 3 to 4 years later, they were all slaughtered and Casca was raped. And most recently, when Guts went to Elfhelm, the entire island was destroyed. A magical island that was perfectly fine for presumably thousands of years was only destroyed after Guts visited it. It almost seems like it's more than just a coincidence. Now, as a point of clarification, I'm not saying that these events happened because of Guts. I'm merely saying that tragedy follows Guts wherever he goes. It's almost like he's a curse, as we would expect of a dark elf. Now, another reason that Guts could possibly be a dark elf is what Danan said in chapter 355. Specifically, she said this to Casca: "You're beautiful, like a dark elf princess." Now, how does this refer to Guts? Well, knowing that Guts and Casca are meant to be together, this would seem to suggest that Guts is the metaphorical dark elf prince. A dark elf prince that unconsciously brings tragedy wherever he goes. Of course, like all my theories, guys, this is speculation. I would love to hear your thoughts about these theories in the comments. Please be respectful and have a nice day.